Welcome, everyone, to our second podcast for the Turing Point. I am Sharmi, a second year PhD student at UCC, Ireland. And with me is Anais, who is a first year PhD from TCD. This issue's topic is gender bias in artificial intelligence, which is a very important and controversial topic, gaining more and more attention in recent times. We have with us Dr. Begum Genc and Buvana Ganesh, both of whom have represented women in AI and STEM. So without further ado, let us start the podcast.
Well, I'm going to start with a very basic question that is could you just please tell us a bit more about yourself?
Thanks, guys, for doing this to begin with. Thanks for the invitation. So as Sharmi has mentioned, my name is Dr. Begum Genc, and I'm working as a postdoctoral researcher at University College Cork. So I'm also lecturing at the same school, and my work is usually on constraint programming, and I'm working on problems that are relevant to solving combinatorial optimization problems and how to solve them in an ethical way. So my work is focusing on the fairness or robustness or explanation aspects of these different problems. And since the beginning of this year, 2022, I'm also serving as the Ireland ambassador for Women in AI. And I'm leaving the microphone to Buvana.
Thank you, Begum. So I am Buvana Ganesh. I am a third year PhD student in University College Cork, and I work on security and privacy along with artificial intelligence. So combining two spheres. I'm a mathematician by education, but right now I'm in computer science. I serve as the events lead in Women in AI. I basically organize events along with a bunch of other lovely ladies for women in AI in order to get the outreach going. So that's me.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So I guess you've started a bit saying about it, but could you just explain a bit more what is Women in AI, what is its goal, when it started, maybe just a few words?
Yeah, so Women in AI is a global organization. So it's non-profit. It was launched in 2017 and headquartered in Paris. So the idea of Women in AI is to provide an inclusive environment in the field of AI for women, other minority groups, any underrepresented group. So we are a community working towards shaping inclusive AI for our common future. This is the motto that we like to use. And we are active in many countries. So I think Women in AI is currently active in about 150 countries. And there's about 40 ambassadors that are managing these areas. And we're mostly active in social media. We organize events. We have many local and also global online events. And nowadays we have about 40,000 members from all across the world. So that's an amazing group. And its main goal is to support all these different types of underrepresented group members. And in Ireland, we are active with 17 members at the moment. So we have 17 core members. And Buvana has been one of the longest serving members of this community. And we are providing different channels of activities. So we are very active on educational activities. We provide certification programs and some online data science projects for people to gain some hands-on experience. And we do a lot of communication related stuff. So we are very active on social media, and we organize a lot of events.
So please like, share, subscribe, and follow us on LinkedIn, because that's where we
That's exactly what I was thinking about. So us as PhD students already, so in Ireland and already in the field of AI, we can freely just join you whenever. Is it?
Yeah, you can just, you have to fill out a form. That's there in the Women in AI page, and you will be a part of the community. So you'll start receiving notifications about things after that. But if you want to truly contribute to the community, organize events with us, just give us a shout out, reach any one of us, and you'll be through. and we are very accessible. So just send us a message in later.
Okay, well, it sounds quite perfect.
So Begum, you mentioned previously that more women or more representation are needed at every level of the workforce. And could you explain a bit about it? And how do you think that the lack of women representation has impacted the field of AI in particular?
Yeah, that's a massive question. When we think about the AI landscape, well, we all know that there's the gender issue. So there's a huge gender disparity in the field of AI, and it exists in many other STEM subjects as well. But when we're looking at the statistics, what we see is that the women participation in AI is about 20%. So you look at the top conferences and you look at the authors of those papers, and what you see is that the leading female authors is the minority. So we are talking about 15% or 20%, somewhere over there. And when you think about all different levels of the workforce, you are starting to think from the students and the postgrad students as yourselves. And there's the academic people, there's the junior people, there's the senior people, managers and everything. So what we see, what we observe is that the more senior you get in the artificial intelligence field, the number of women are decreasing. And this is actually a massive problem, because imagine, even if when you think about the universities, because we're all part of universities, when you think about that, you see lectures, or let's start from the postgrad level. So after being a student, you apply for a postgrad position, for instance. I'm talking about an academic career here. And as a postgrad female student, probably this is something that you have also noticed, that the female percentage is considerably low in the lab when you compare to the male postgrad students. And then when you go to the researcher level, you see a sharp decline, that females are usually not proceeding to the research roles. And from there, or if you think about the lecturer position, think about the assistant lecturer position, for instance. Again, the number of women are really low in those positions. And then you go to the senior lecturer, then it's even lower. And for instance, speaking of University College Cork, for this year, we don't even have any professors that are female at the university. So that's basically zero. And the main problem here is that at each level, you always think about a role model for yourself when you look at the higher level. And the higher level keeps declining and declining and declining in terms of gender balance. And what you start feeling is that there's a problem there. Maybe you don't really belong there. Maybe you shouldn't be progressing because you don't really see the role models there. So that's not the place for women. You start to think about these things, or people tell you, why would you go for a promotion anyway? It's going to be more difficult. So then the challenges start to arise. And that's why I strongly believe that it's really important to include women at all different levels of the workforce. And it's even more important to include them in the more senior roles, so that they can become role models for the younger generations, for the people that are going to follow them. And especially in AI, because the gender gap is so high, and this gender gap, the lack of women in the AI developing teams, is causing the AI applications to be biased. So there's a huge problem there. We see a gender bias or a negative bias for women in the AI applications that are being developed. And when you look at the teams that are developing those things, again, you see something like 20% women participation in those teams. And that's one of the main causes of this problem, not just data, but the representation of women in the teams. So if you don't increase the numbers, you will fall into the same old habits, and you will have the bias inherently, or these problems will arise. Therefore, I think that we really need women to participate in all different levels, both academia, industry, and junior and especially senior roles.
Yeah,
Thank you,
that
Begum.
I totally agree. But and also we have to look at why people the percentage keeps dropping as the levels go up. We have to find out the reason, and we find that a lot of people take maternity leaves. They have transitions. They have gap years in their resume because they decided to pursue a lot of different things in the middle as well. And the evaluation for this is done differently for men and women because the maternity leaves it's going to affect, for example, if you're in academia, it's going to affect your H index and stuff. So if that happens, then the way you are evaluated is different. So you there should be standardization from there and in through all the levels in order to give women the same footing as men. This just progressively gets worse as the years go along, which means as the seniority goes on, there's just lesser women. And if you look at the bachelor students who are looking up to role models, then if they don't find any, then you don't see a lot of people working in the same sphere. I come from two underrepresented communities, security, and that security has basically like 24% women. I've heard accounts of people actually changing branches because they couldn't find anyone who they could hear, who could hear them and actually contribute to them. To their cause. If you see a lack of representation in the seniority, you will automatically start feeling, okay, you may think, oh, there are other role models I may have. But when it comes to issues and policies and stuff like that, you need a seniority and representation in the seniority for you to be heard. And that is where communities like Women in AI come in, where we give you a voice, an opportunity for you to get to know people who are going through the same things as you and make yourself heard.
So actually, Buvana, you have touched a really nice point. I want to elaborate on this a little bit more, if I may. So you mentioned that the main reasons behind why women are not able to proceed to the more senior positions, that's a really important point. And we actually have this concept of invisible work. So this is usually just ignored by both women and men. It's just invisible. So what does it mean? When you talk about invisible work of women, you're mentioning about the extra work that women are doing in the house. So let it be cooking, cleaning, or childcare, or just caregiving to elderly, just any type of work that the women are doing. So there's research on this, and women are actually doing a lot of invisible work. And for instance, with the COVID, this has increased the numbers that the hours that women are spending on this invisible work has increased. So what does it mean? It means that women have less work or less time to focus on their personal, professional careers. When you think about a researcher, for instance, it's often the case that when I'm doing research with other people, I'm receiving emails at night. Or let's say at 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., people are asking me questions, and I'm talking about my male colleagues. And it immediately makes me think that, and in the meanwhile, probably I'm just washing the dishes or doing something in the house, you know? And it immediately makes you think that these people, they have the time on their hands. So there's that group of people, they're sitting there doing some research and publishing papers, writing papers, reading papers. They have more time. And I know that women have time as well. I'm not trying to find any excuses for this, but this is just women are really spending more time by doing the invisible work, and this needs to be credited. And this needs to be acknowledged when they are proceeding to the more senior roles. And the same thing applies for men. If you have more caring responsibilities, if you are spending your time doing the house cleaning and stuff, it also applies to those people. So these types of things should be included in promotion applications or job search applications. And this is an important aspect.
Yep.
Thank you, Begum. I totally agree. And I think a lot of times there's also a lot of dropout rate, especially from like women who are employed, not just in AI, in STEM courses or in jobs which are STEM, because it is so demanding mentally and physically. And you have the guilt working as well, because you don't see many representatives high up and you think that your first job is for your family or for your child or whatever, and you prioritize it, and slowly you just give up after a point because there's no accommodation of your requirements and your needs. And so this is something that really needs a lot of work and a lot of there's more of a paving a path, I suppose, in like a new path, because more and more people need to work in this area. And we have to make it easier for them, not more difficult.
So just as you've started saying, so Buvana, you're working on security, and just I was wondering if we could just bring the conversation to more specificities of AI, and like, what is your experience with maybe algorithms and data, and maybe something that would be related to security?
That's an excellent question. I work with both security and artificial intelligence as such. But so I'm currently working on privacy preserving natural language processing. So I can start from there. So one of the first things you can see is how a lot of Latin languages are very gendered. So and they are the most commonly used languages as well. So when you're using Google Translate, there is a branch of NLP called machine translation, which deals with this. So when you start with machine translation, one of the things that you do is to try to have the article and the noun translated. And most of the time, positions of power are associated with men, whereas positions of, say, art or something like a doctor is always considered a man, and a nurse is always considered a woman. And when you do word embeddings as well, that is how most of the mappings work. And so if you take a language like Turkish, which is Begum's mother tongue, then it would get translated to a non-gendered article. But if you translate it back to English, it will almost always associate a position of power to a man and any other position to a woman. So this is the start, for example. And you go on to word embeddings, and then you go on to let's say medical data sets, anything that involves studies done on a woman, say hormone related stuff that are injected and given on trial to men, on a vast majority to white men in specific. And then you apply the same things to a woman, and you don't get the same results as well, because you don't have enough data. And then you have bias that comes up there as well. And then we have things like that involve automation. For example, something like credit score calculation. Credit score calculation almost always is skewed when it comes to men and women because of the prerequisites that are given to the credit rather than the history of that person's credit. So if you like, insurance calculation is done very similarly as well, but that is kind of favorable to women. So I'm going to leave it there for now. But if you look at credit score calculation, it's the same. It's just if you look at all these data sets, there is an amazing book called Invisible Women, talking about invisible work. There is a book called Invisible Women by Carolina Perez. I'll drop the name somewhere if you want. So this book beautifully addresses all these data sets that are generally skewed because of the way that the data is collected and the way that the data is analyzed and put out to the rest of the world about how skewed it can be and how it affects our daily life as well. It's not like this is a problem that everybody is shouting about because why are we still shouting about these problems? Because there are problems that exist in today's world as well. We're not just talking about pockets. That is another issue for another day. We need bigger pockets and we need better air conditioning because it is all assigned according to the male body temperature. And these are small things that do affect women on an everyday basis. And it can grow higher and higher as well as you go along. For example, voice assistants, the kind of information that you get from them. For example, Siri used to not address things like where can I get an abortion pill, but it did give men information about Viagra pills. So this this is the kind of info, the amount of skew that that exists because of data sets, because of where it starts. And one of the things that we can address here is data collection, because a lot more women, as you take, if you leave out the first world countries and look at the world as such, then a lot less women use technology on a frequent basis, which means that the data collected through the social media platforms and the internet as such can be skewed in this way as well. So there are different layers to the problem as we go along, and there should be like a lot of things that should be done in order to standardize these approaches, to analyze the data sets and the algorithms before you put it to public use. There were problems not just with women, but other groups as well, like African Americans, and with respect to facial recognition, and how badly it can be with respect to, if you take the problem to another level, then look at skin cancer detection. Then a lot of data sets are based on white men there as well. And then what about a Black woman? How skewed will it be when you apply the same thing to these people? It's all that's where the problem arises. If you have a data set that involves people as such and not machines, you will start getting problems, because the data is just a mirror for how the society is as such. It's just reflecting all the things that we are doing today. So it should say something about that. What do you have to say, Begum?
You beautifully summed it up, Buvana. I think all the points that you have touched are really relevant. And it just, because of the security aspect of the question, it just made me think about the use of AI for criminal detections, for instance. You know, this has been a huge debate recently, and it happened in Ireland too. So they wanted to use the AI face detection algorithms, or that technology, to identify or to track people with criminal activities. And you already touched upon that. It's not fair. Those algorithms are not fair. You can just judge someone just based on their ethnicity, on their race, on their gender by mistake, because of the inherent bias that exists in your data set, or the historical bias that you had. So these are definitely some security threats for people, or these types of applications pose some security threats to people. And it shouldn't be just blindly implemented and used in critical matters. And probably this is why we have the AI Act. And this is why the European Commission is working on creating some sort of regulation on AI, because it shouldn't be appearing everywhere, implemented by anyone. There should be some standards for AI technology to be used if it is used in if it's used in important critical applications.
What you were saying also kind of made me think about so you were talking about how data are retrieved from social network and social media, and so and the impact of users. So not only because you retrieve the data from them, and I didn't actually think of the lack of balance between women on social media and maybe men on social media. I just didn't think about it before. But I'm also thinking about the fact that some research is done by those big companies which have the data, and there's also the question of pleasing your users as well. So it should always, well, maybe not always, but it should necessarily come from the users as well, because if those companies just want to make profit, then they might just give what people want to them and just try to please them a lot. And then is there a point for them to try to like fight those biases, really? So I just found it like very interesting.
So the last question is for both of you. How do you think that for us as a modern scientific society that we think, how can we overcome this massive problem of gender bias? Like, what approach should we take for it? How should we start? Like, what's the starting point?
I think the
Begum, do you
starting
want to-
point is to speak about it. So this is what we do with women in AI. So people sometimes think that, like, "Oh, why do you need these types of groups? You know, we have women in research, women in AI, I don't know, the Black people communities, Black women in tech, or the transgender communities." So people said, "Oh, why are you creating those communities? Because this is causing more bias and this is causing more discrimination and all those things." It doesn't really, because of these communities. These problems are being talked about. So we speak about these things. We address the problems. We are saying that there is a problem here. And we are trying to, for instance, raise some role models. We are trying to highlight some of the women. Speaking of women in AI, we are trying to highlight women in the AI field that have great technical competence. So it's known that, for instance, women are, when they're applying for a job, the women are likely to say that they can achieve less, or they're reporting less of their achievements. They write their knowledge in a less impactful way in their CVs. But it's apparently on the contrary for men. The men are saying that I can't do this, I can't do that, I did this. So they're just bragging about all these things, you know. So it is important to be aware of these differences, and it's important to speak about that and notify the public about that, so that people know that there's actually a problem, because people are talking about it, right? And this goes on to the national AI strategy, this goes on to the European Commission, this goes on there, and then people start forming groups. And now nowadays, you know that in universities and almost all the organizations, they're forming equality and diversity units. So the aim of those units is to ensure the equality, ensure the diversity within the organization. And this didn't exist, let's say, 20 years ago. This is forming recently. This is a fairly new thing that's happening in companies, because people were talking about it. Now people understand the problems and they're trying to address them. This is very important. So to begin with, it's really important to support these nonprofit organizations, any of them, whichever you feel like you belong to. I wish we could cover all the problems as women in AI or as individuals, but unfortunately it's it's impossible. There are so many minorities, so many underrepresented groups, and almost all of them have a relevant community. So I really suggest that people find those communities that they belong to, they feel like they belong to, and they volunteer for them. And also, of course, we talked a lot about the hiring process and that people should be appearing in more senior roles. And this is also something that I think this is for the managers or the leaders in companies and for the HR people in companies. I think that they should be aware of these different problems, such as the invisible work that we were talking about, for instance, and they should develop some strategies for hiring women, or how to keep women in the workforce to begin with, starting from being a student and and then continuing into a more junior role and then to a senior role. How do you keep the women within the organization? So what do you offer to them? Or can you do better? Can you address their problems? This is something that they need to think about. And if not, if you're looking for adding some more females into your team, then they should also think about some other strategies like headhunting people or considering different evaluation techniques for people that has applied for your job. So I know that this is a lot of hassle, and these problems are not completely solved yet. We don't know. We can't just Google and say that, how do I overcome the gender bias problem in my organization? The solution doesn't exist, right? It's all specific to the company, but there are some strategies that people can follow. At least there are some questions that people can think about. And I think this is the first step to solving the gender bias in AI. And of course, so far, I haven't even talked about the dataset related problems. How do we solve the gender bias in datasets? that's another problem, and maybe Buvana may want to contribute to that aspect a little bit too.
Yeah, yeah. I have so many points to add. About the role models, you may think that, okay, there are other people that you can consider role models. I talked to, as a part of EPE, Begum and I were involved in something called I Wish a couple of years back, where we talked to a lot of school students in Cork, especially girl students, encouraging them to take up STEM. I personally talked to at least like 10 girls there, who I asked them questions like, what do you want to do in your life and stuff like that. And they were all either saying doctor, nurse, or teacher. I respect that, but I asked them why you're not considering taking up something like other branches of STEM, like computer science. They said that they find it too difficult and they don't see themselves doing something like that because they don't see any role models. So if there are people just posing to them as role models for something in this, they are working on this. It helps students from an early age in order to pick up these skills and become role models for the kids in the future. But if you don't see them doing that now, you don't see them doing that in the future as well. So role models are actually very important when you go into an organization and you have someone who has gone through the same things as you. Begum was a role model for me when I joined UCC because she was the only other female staff in an entire lab of about 40 people. And when I started talking to her after 6 months, I found that I had talked to other male colleagues as well in the process. And I got the encouragement, the kind of understanding that I did not get from them about certain problems. From Begum, she helped me out a lot. A lot of things she said made sense to me. That's from the topic of role models. About in general, some solutions that you can do concretely. We were discussing about this as well. So unconscious bias training is something that can be enforced on employees by organizations. A lot of employees do go through this, I guess, in corporate and other spheres of life, where you just unconsciously discriminate against groups of people who are in general are underrepresented, not just women, where you tend to associate certain characteristics with certain people. And you may not be perceived as sexist or racist for just doing that, but these are things that are deep-rooted in us from society that we have to try to remove. And these kind of trainings and persistent trainings, consistent amount of work given towards it, will change things eventually in the future. This is one sort of processes that you can do like concretely. Another thing that is going on now is positive discrimination, where women, there are female-only roles, and if a female leaves the company, then another female replaces that female's position. Not because you're not putting out the role, not based on talent. There are talented females, but if you have this phase where you do go through positive discrimination, then you will not have to go through a phase like this again in the future, because there is already a good balance between all the communities. So this will help you just go towards that equal future step by step over time. It's not a problem that can be solved overnight. It's a problem that will take time to build up, and then you take all the procedures and change the mentality of probably an entire generation of people for you to finally overcome and solve it. So that is my opinion. Some of those are my opinions anyway. You can always call me out on them and I can change them whenever I want. But yeah, these are my some things that you can do.
They're very valuable opinions, Buvana. I think they're just brilliant ideas.
Thank you.
Well, I second you on the looking at Begum as a role model. I think a lot of PhDs in the lab look at her as a role model, was actually managed to go there, get to the other side and doing so well for herself. But my question is, do you think a lot of women are afraid to speak up for the discrimination or the problems that they're facing in fear of a pushback from them? Like, they just want to get by, they just want to keep the job. Is that one of the reasons why they can't really put the voice out? There's a sense of fear running in most women. What do you think about that?
I think it depends on the organization or the role or the manager that you have a little bit. So maybe I'm just speaking based on an assumption here. Maybe some women could be really afraid, like if they're working with leaders that are not really capable of leading well, then they would be afraid. But I think this applies to men as well, because if you're working with such a leader, then you will be quiet in front of that leader. You will not really feel comfortable and share your concerns with that person. Um, Probably there are some cases, such as I'm aware of some people, for instance, they want to have kids, they want to have a family. But speaking of academia, for instance, the research contracts are usually done for 1 year or 2 years, and there's a limitation on them. So I'm aware of many researcher females that are afraid of having kids because they will have to go on maternity leave. And then when they share the news with their leaders, or team leaders, PIs, whatever you call them, then they're afraid that they will not renew their contract. So things like that, yes, it probably doesn't apply to a man, because the man doesn't need to take, let's say, 6 months of leave from work. So such concerns, such stress don't apply to them. But the women feel these types of things more often, and they tend to hide their feelings or maybe their ideas from their bosses. So I think this is a bad thing. And guys, thank you so much for for your kind words about me. I'm aware of the situation. Unfortunately, as you said, in our lab, there's a clear imbalance in gender. But I'm happy that in the recent year there has been more female hirings to our lab, and especially for the PhD students, the numbers have increased a lot. Still, because the more senior you go, still we are seeing less women in these roles. But I think there's a few more postdoctoral researchers around, so I feel more comfortable as well. It is such a strange feeling to be the only person from a certain group in a group of many people. It just feels strange. And you just want to share things sometimes, and in a free way, right? You just want to be understood. That's all you want. And this is why representation from all different communities, not just female versus male, all different communities should be represented in a nice workplace. So we talk about diversity, we talk about inclusion. These are really important aspects.
Yeah. In terms of management as well, if the management is not properly listening to you, for example, kudos to the CRT on this point. When they were announcing I'm from the first cohort, so I don't know about what happened in my cohort, but for the following cohorts, the project coordinator actually hired a gender expert. They do exist, in order to correct the way that the application was made for the call for participants was made for the PhD, and including more words that were relevant to the females made the application more appealing for the females as well. So there are ways in which you can accommodate females, and they do exist. You just have to listen to them. You have to ask it, not look at it just as complaining, but to actually ask people what can be changed and accommodate those changes, even if they are minor, like turning up the temperature a little bit in the offices. Come on, what is that about? But in general, stuff like that, the small things that make a comfortable workplace where you can be your best self. You can actually focus on the thing you were hired to do rather than focus on the minor things that shouldn't be important in the future.
Yeah, I totally agree. Small things actually make a massive difference in how you're working and how you output, basically. Anais, do you want to ask them anything else?
I could have just shared a bit. So all this kind of made me think of, so I wasn't an undergrad in STEM. I was doing linguistics. I wasn't really appealed by the mathematics, computer science and everything. That was kind of my brother's thing. So I'm the kind of person who just decided to go for linguistics, which is more like an arts field. And then I did a master's degree in NLP. So I was kind of slowly going towards computer science, but many people in my undergrad actually are not working in linguistic anymore because there's just no real, I mean, it's hard to find a job there with only linguistics. And we knew that going for computer science was actually an option that would give us more opportunities in the future. But lots of them were just saying, yeah, no, I just cannot do computer science. It's just too hard. And I'm not feeling like I could do it. And again, after eventually I reached the PhD level, now I'm in the School of Computer Science. And it took me like several months to be fine with the fact that first I was a PhD student, but also I was in the School of Computer Science. I was like, what is this? Like, I don't belong there really. So I completely get where the lack of representation can just really prevent you from going somewhere. Yeah, I don't know if for you that, if you feel like it's been easy for you to actually get there and you've always known that you wanted to go there and there was nothing on your, there was no obstacle at all, or if it was more of, I don't know how you felt how it was for you.
That's a difficult question.
Yeah.
That's actually a very valid point. So I think this is one of the stereotypical problems about computer science. When you say computer science, people, especially the young people, immediately think about mathematical formulas and just all those crazy scientist stuff that we see in the movies, right? The classic black terminal and the green letters flying in it. They immediately think about that. But actually, computer science has many different aspects to it. So it has so many subfields. You don't have to be, I mean, obviously, we are talking about engineering or we are talking about computer science. You should know your mathematics to some certain degree, but you can be a software developer. You can be, maybe you have more soft skills, and people think that the job is not suitable for them. But actually, that's a problem, because the computer scientist or computer science, computer engineering, it's not only about hard skills. So it's not only about knowing your mathematics well, but it's also about thinking about the implications of the programs that you are developing. You really need soft skills. You need empathy. We need leaders that have empathy in the field to begin with. That's a massive soft skill. So you need to think about the ethics of what you're doing, the trustworthiness and all that. So now I'm really glad that the interdisciplinary work has been promoted more and more. And I'm so glad that people from other backgrounds, other fields, they finally feel like they can also be a part of computer science. And we started to see that. We started to understand that. And now people like you, Anais, they will be role models to next generations. Then they will think that, okay, she did that, so I can do the same. I don't need to be scared of it. And this is the beauty of representation and being a role model, because you inspire the other people to find courage, or the next person will be just like you, just walking into the lab of computer scientists thinking that she is the only one that doesn't belong there, or that's like feeling odd in there. But if you're there, then when someone comes over there and talks to you, you can give them a couple of ideas. You can tell them that, look, guys, there's nothing to worry about. We can all work together, and this is perfectly fine. This is what happens now. And that's the beauty of it. Personally speaking, I always wanted to be an architect when I was around the time that I was applying for my undergrad. I always wanted to build things, but then things have changed. I'm lucky that I had really nice mentors, including my brother, who was telling me that computer science is not only all about this stereotypical things. So you have the skills enough for it, and you have the skills or interest to go for it, so go for it. So this is the type of people we need, and we need to inspire them. I'm talking about male people, and we need to inspire them to encourage their next generations of females in their families and to educate them accordingly.
I have to do a quick plug-in for women in AI here. Of course. So we are especially helping out a lot of people who are transitioning between areas, different areas, basically going interdisciplinary, because a lot of AI can be applied to a vast variety of areas. It cannot be confined to just computer science. For these people, we have projects. We have a program called Y Practice, where we help them with the projects by assigning mentors who have been in the field for more than 5 years. And we call these people, we ask them to do projects with other people who are just at your level, so that you can improve on your skills. This gives like a nice introduction to people who want to get into AI, what to expect. And this also provides like a networking opportunity for you to combine, talk to people who are like you, and go on a career ascension, probably venture into AI as well. So you can apply AI no matter which discipline you're from: finance, bioengineering, any discipline you want. You can apply AI to your discipline as well. And that's why communities like Women in AI form a role there. Even if you don't have anyone to personally encourage you in order to go into computer science or something like that, if you find a community that is trying to do the same thing, it will encourage you to achieve your goals.
That's excellent.
Definitely.
That's actually a very, very important plugin. People can really find help from it. As more and more people should actually join Women in AI and join this whole work towards building this pathway and making it more easier for women to work in STEM, artificial intelligence, wherever they want to work, and not get downtrodden by bias and everything. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's lovely chatting with you.
Thank you guys
having
for
us.
facilitating this important discussion. It's really important, and I hope we can inspire at least one or two people.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Always speak up, always make sure you're heard. Your opinions matter. Go and rock the world. See you.
That's the best
Bye-bye.
way to complete this. Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thank you.
Yeah.